I'm going to declare this meeting of for Town Council Chapter 40 as Subcommittee on September 12th, 2024, open as of 6:03 p.m. Don't have a gavel, so I'll just knock. Call to order. We have we have Councilor Dombrowski on. We did have Councilor Vincent, but he is having some technical difficulties and is trying to get back in. Nonetheless, we'll move forward, and I'll ask everybody to stand and join with me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. What's that?
Okay, now I can hear you.
You can hear us? Okay. We'll probably hear the reverb if they do, right? Okay, we're through the Pledge of Allegiance. That means we're already on item 3, and I'm going to turn it over, I believe, to our senior planner, Samantha, relative to potential district maps. That sound right, Samantha?
Yes. Is the PowerPoint visible to everybody? Okay, just wanted to double check before I start. So I just want to go over some of the feedback that I had from your group, this is the subcommittee, about the potential districts, and then what it looks like we're looking at numbers wise. Both, will it go? There it goes, sorry. Okay, so how did we get here? Again, we collaborated with the public. We've had public meetings. We had a survey that had over 850 responses. We held the public forum. We gained guidance on our new map, guidance on the locations, on whether or not an off-site district would be desired, and if there was support for character areas, looking at different densities, looking at mandatory mixed use areas, that kind of stuff. So we have, I feel like, a good launching place to start talking about what Wakefield needs to meet, and then how we're looking at proposing that, at least at this point in time. So our minimums, again, just to refresh everybody's memory, is we have a minimum district of 36 acres. Again, 50% of that needs to be contiguous, so a minimum of 18 acres of contiguous district, and 1,696 units, 15 units an acre, and 75% of that need to be within station areas. Up to 25% can be located off-site. So the districts that we've come up with based off of this, there's the North Ave mandatory mixed use. There's Audubon Road, which is our off-site. There's Greenwood, which is another station area. Albion Street, and then Foundry. So and that gives us, so these are all the actual numbers of potential maximum units. And again, it's 1,722 total units within these areas. Gives us a slight buffer from the minimum from the state. So looking at the areas in detail, here's the North Avenue mandatory mixed use. That's what MMU stands for. I just didn't have enough room to put it all onto the slide. This talks about, or the mandatory mixed use component refers to mixed use being required to be on the first floor. And then residential could be up to 2 additional stories above. The current density of this area is kind of mixed. A lot of it's currently just commercial. The colored parcels that you see on here are the ones that are either within or slightly abutting. I did the best I could with trying to draw all these lines on residency without being able to drop in the shapefile. So some of it's a little bit, you'll see the ones highlighted along the edge. That's what that is. But there isn't, within the kind of blue boundary that you can see, that's the actual district that would be the North Avenue mandatory mixed use district. And that is, again, right around the train station. Right now, there's only 6 parcels that have residential uses within the boundaries. The rest of them are just commercial, or whether that's a retail or office space or like a gas station or something, restaurants, there's a whole variety of different uses up and down North Ave. So this particular area would allow by right the commercial again on the first floor and then residential above as an option. Do you have any questions? I can go into, I don't know how much detail you want me to go into what the existing numbers are. So this area is 9 acres and the current density is almost the 15 units per acre. So it's really on par with what, or it's in keeping with the character of what MBTA communities looks like. This little breakdown kind of just goes over what the existing uses are within that area, just so you know. It's pulled from Residensity, which you can access yourself and is available online to play around with. Did you have any quick questions before I go to the next district? Yeah.
Could I just ask Sam, just with each of these districts, if you could also maybe just point out to us some of the negatives or drawbacks relative to each of these? I think that'd be helpful for us to understand too. Because I know like this, for instance, it has the
oh, you mean to like mandatory mixed use?
Yeah,
The
right,
restrictions
exactly.
would be?
That's what I'm thinking for this in particular. I think
Sure.
there's some hesitation previously about that. I'm not saying it's not worth pursuing, but if you could just for each of these kind of identify anything, hey, this is good, but
Yeah.
that'd be helpful.
So part of the reason why mandatory mixed use is something that we've heavily considered and are, I mean, as we started to go through this process, and then what is being proposed right now, again, this can all change with public comment. But the mandatory mixed use keeps that first floor space online as commercial, so that when you're walking up and down the area, it maintains the existing character. One of the benefits is not just maintaining that character, but also it allows us to calculate all of those potential units towards our maximum, our minimum number that the state is requiring under MBTA communities. It does not allow us to calculate that acreage. So we have to make sure that we're still getting to that 50% number by including other areas, which is why Foundry and Albion Street are tied into, because they're abutting this North Ave. North Ave is kind of acting like a connector between Albion and Foundry. And I'll show you there's a map that, well, I can actually go back on this one. You can kind of see in the green, although this green map doesn't show both sides of Albion. The green is Albion Street. The blue is this mandatory mixed use area of North Ave. And then the orange is Foundry. So it allows, kind of acts like, you know, the middle of a sandwich to help keep things tied together so that we have the ability to meet that contiguous district acreage requirement of 18 acres. And North Ave, this section is 9 acres itself. So is there anything else where?
Yeah, I mean, I knew
Okay.
there was something with the mixed use piece and it was just the acreage doesn't get counted, but you're saying we've offset that by the contiguous nature of the others. Okay, so that's
yes.
I mean, it's a negative, but not really if we were to pursue this.
It allows us to, it reflects that we're getting closer to those minimum numbers instead of boosting up the acreage. It's kind of a trade-off. And again, a lot of these areas, you would be allowed to maintain that first floor space online, which is one of the big things that I think is really crucial to having a thriving commercial district and maintaining that commercial character. Again, referring it back to the character areas. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the next district then. And if anybody has any questions, I can always pop back and forth.
Can I ask one question first, Sam, or make a
Sure.
comment? So in
Absolutely.
this unit, what we're kind of proposing at this point is that it's two-story max, correct? First story.
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Go ahead. I
That
believe
you
so.
said a slide before, right? A two-story max.
It would be 2 stories of residential on top
Okay.
of the commercial.
So if I own Wakefield House of Pizza, all the old timers will know what that is, on Tuttle Street. You could go potentially 2 stories up, potentially, right on the train station.
Yeah, consistent with some of the other
Right, yeah, there's other things that have to be met, but
other
okay.
developments on there. Yeah. And then of course there's potential for zoning regulations that would tie into that as well.
Okay, answer a quick question. Is that something that just happens to be blue on that map? over Chestnut and.
The North Ave mandatory mixed use district is the blue that goes up and down.
A single residence, it's blue.
Oh, I think that, no, that's not, there's something at the corner of Chestnut, and I can't read that because
Oh,
my.
that's a blue, I'm sorry. That is a blue roof.
Okay.
It is not part of the district. Or just reflecting blue back on the map. It's not part of the district. It's only this
Yeah.
area right here.
That would really be spot zoning, just the. That's right.
And it would be non-contiguous, so not helpful
Yeah.
for us anyway. And this all had to go through, just as a quick background, this all had to go through the state for review prior to us being actually able to put it forward. And we have a formal approval back. So that's fine for that one. The next
And
is the
that also,
offsite.
before you run off, I'm sorry, Mike, that also includes the Tono's building, which is that big brown one, okay.
That's the one
kinda
down
what's
at,
in Right.
between Armory and Water down at, yes, the brownish one, at the almost the bottom of the district. So the next area is Audubon Road. It's just about 12 acres, that individual parcel. And right now it has 176 units in the building. And then it has all of the parking all around it that meet the requirements. There's also some wetlands that are involved. So there's a portion, obviously you can see here by looking at it, that would not be able to be developed. Here is the parcel just called out on the density map, just showing that it's already existing residential and would be looked at as a fairly dense development out in that area. I'll pop back really quick to the proposed. Now, again, in order for this lot to be developed, what's there existing would have to be demolished, but it does have the potential of giving us 418 units because going up just 10 stories, utilizing what's there based on the acreage per the consultant, which is supposed to pull out the wetlands and the hydrology, and there's all this watershed and all these different little layers that of things that are included. So that's what's supposed to be reflected. Again, even if it ever did, if there was, an extreme situation where it was demolished, they could go back with that. They still have to meet all of the other zoning requirements and parking, and all of this can be hashed out in the bylaw. But this was one area that was shown in the survey heavily, as well as the subcommittee requesting to look at as the offsite location. So continuing on, and with the offsite, we get to include the acreage towards our total and the number of units towards our total. So it gives us a good bonus or bump on the numbers that we're looking to. So the next area I'm going to go to is
Sam, can I ask
Greenwood.
you one? Can I ask you
Yes,
one question
absolutely.
about Audubon?
Sure.
This is really hard for me. I'm on my phone. I can barely read the slides, but that slide on Audubon indicated 418 units.
Yes,
When we
based off
look-
of acreage.
When we looked at some charts before, it said there was the potential for 452 units. How did that change from 452 down to 418?
Double checking hydrology and watershed and some of the excluded areas, and then trying to tighten it up, getting closer to the minimum.
Okay.
Because that was what was expressed both by the subcommittee and by the public, trying to get closer to the minimums. If we don't need those extra 20 or 30 units, or however many it would end up being, that we can pull it back down just to get closer.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Okay, so the next area would be Greenwood, going off of the existing kind of commercial character area that's there and existing multifamily developments. That's about 13 acres and currently has a density of 7.68 units per acre. That's partially because it is not as heavily developed as mixed use as some of the other areas. But again, through the public forum and through surveys and the subcommittee, there was a lot of interest in adding Greenwood to support some revitalization in that area and support some additional development coming in. So it would have a potential of bringing in bringing in 323 units and 2 stories total, and with the potential of mixed use in that area. So, and it has a variety of different housing. Now there's what you're seeing on this little chart over to
I think you're on
the
North
right.
Ave. You're on North Ave.
Thanks. What you're seeing on this chart over to the right is that there's condo, there is some mixed use, which is at the corner of Greenwood and is that Main? And then there's of course some single family, there's some 2-family, and then some commercial space as well as some apartments. So there is potential in this area, in this particular district, for that mixed use to be added back in, or apartment buildings as proposed currently. Are there any questions on that one before I pop over to the next one?
So this Greenwood area includes the larger, I think they're condos, not apartments, kind of across from the one, you can see it there. And does this include any of the plaza?
The plaza that's down here?
Right there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Greenwood
All right.
Plaza. Mhm.
Okay.
The entirety of Greenwood Plaza. And then it goes south to, there's a multifamily district down here.
Right.
And that's the terminus of the Greenwood MBTA district. I'll go to the next district, which is Albion Street. This includes both the north side and the south side of Albion Street. The north side presents, as a side note, does present some challenges with development, because some of the lots are fairly small. So don't know how much it would potentially give us. I think with MBT, I forgot there was a very small, maybe just a handful of units. But in an effort to really support the mixed use component, that's what we are looking at on Albion Street is both side, the north side and the south side of Albion Street. And it also captures an existing 5-story, it's like 4 with a garden level, at the corner of Foster and Richardson. So it's incorporating this area, again, helps us to get to our 50% contiguous area. And it also reflects what the survey and the forum, as well as the subcommittee, had requested. So this area currently has some mixed use existing. It has some residential, which are the areas that are colored. So residency, and on this particular layer that I've turned on, that you can see, the grayed out parcels are the ones that are commercial uses only, and then are exclusively commercial. And then the ones that are colored are showing the various densities of the residential units. So it currently has 137 units in the area. And it can go up to, I need to take a picture of this, I'm not flapping back and forth for y'all, an additional 50 units, meeting the MBTA requirements that they have for how many units an acre. So, or up to 50 units. That one I'll have to double check, because it would be 2 stories. So you'd have a first floor potential of mixed use. It's not mandated in this particular district. And then it would have a second floor as residential, whether it's mixed use on the first floor or residential on the first floor. So we're going to, if this area does move forward, we would look at trying to find ways to incentivize mixed use. There are a variety of different ways to do that for the first floor, so that you could maintain having that first floor space online and maintain some of that commercial component in this area. And right now, the density is 19.89 units per acre. And MBTA Communities aims for 15 units an acre. So it's right in keeping with the existing density in the area. Does anybody have any questions before I pop to the next one?
Samantha, this is Mike. Is there, what's the total acreage of this one again?
This is about just under 7 acres.
And is the Wakefield item building one of the larger green ones there on the, I guess it would be the south side of Albion?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. It seems like that could someday potentially create, you know, even at 2 stories, some units. If it was ever changed from what it currently is.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a number of potential sites that this particular district is capturing.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, Sam, just to be clear on that. So the green is the potential district. Could you help to just better delineate just the color coding that surrounds it?
Yeah, so it's slightly easier to see on just the satellite image, but it's really just the lots that are abutting Albion Street and then pulling in that garden apartment building that's at the corner of Foster and Richardson.
Okay.
And then here, what you're seeing is within the green boundary, the colored parcels are the ones that currently have residential uses, and then the subsequent densities. So if it's darker, it's a higher density. The lighter it is, the lower the density. It helps to kind of give a very basic visual of what existing residential is there currently.
Got it.
Right,
Thanks.
and those colored lots that abut Chestnut Street are not included in the district.
No,
just-
they're not.
It's part of the density map. When you pulled it up, that's what happened.
Yeah, it does some of the abutting lots, even when you try to try to pull them out. But yeah, it also kind of shows the surrounding area has a higher density of housing as well.
So I guess like looking at that, so let's take Chestnut, for instance, there are like 2 like maroon or like, you know, darker red.
Darker, yeah,
That would be higher density. So that actually
correct.
higher density would be abutting the district. And when you look at the district, your proposed district, the density is comparatively lighter, it looks like. Well, I mean, you know, for the most part, right?
Yes, and all up and down Richardson, I believe the one closest to Foster Street, which is towards the right on your screen,
Yeah.
is an office building. And then the ones towards the left are actually garden apartment buildings. So those are also a higher density than like single family or even a 2-family. I think that there's like 38 units on the one
On the
to the
far
right.
right, where the brown is, right?
I'm sorry, to the far left, the one that's not highlighted, that's on Richardson, just south of the district. So just reiterating that there are higher densities abutting Albion Street.
And the far right that's the brick, like a 2 or 3 story, I think it is, right?
It's 4 stories plus a
4-story.
garden, because it
Okay.
kind of Richardson kind of goes down right there at the corner of Foster.
Yeah.
And so from the front, it reads as a 4-story building, but as you go around the side, it comes around and it's a 5-story building. With garden level apartments or garden level units or uses or whatnot down there. Sorry. So, all right. So the next district is Foundry Street. And this really captures a lot of the existing development that's been happening in Foundry, and really reflects the existing development density. It is already 35.45 units per acre in this area. So it's about roughly about 35 units an acre. There are a number of condo buildings, and apartment building or condos and apartments, as well as new ones that are being built. So this area already is reflective of a higher density. So we tried to capture those as part of the district. That's part of why it goes up north here. And so in this area, you have about 600 units of residential. A lot of on the corner of Foundry and Albion, you have the big tall building that has a number of units. That's one of the denser spots in this area. And this does not include the building that's at the corner of Lake Street and Albion that's being constructed currently, nor does it include the about 55 unit building that's on Foundry on the east side of it, that's being built down towards the end of the district. And so this district boundary is in black. It was the best I could do to try to have all of visibility with the various densities, and is about 35, again, 35 units per acre. So very much in keeping with the goals. It allows us to really get that unit count, as well as giving us that 50% of the contiguous district near the station, since it is abutting Wakefield. And so in this particular area, you could do up to 775 units. The existing unit under MBTA communities, just giving out a rough estimate. And that's going up to 5 stories, which again is mostly consistent with what's in the area. But most of this being developed, it would be highly unlikely that we would see that many units being built all at once, unless, again, this entire area would have to be wiped out. Which, you know, nobody's wishing that. Nobody's wishing that. Just to kind of, it's in keeping with the existing density, and fairly similar unit count to what's there currently. So does anybody have any questions about that one?
Samantha, it's Mike. What's the acreage of that one?
It's roughly 17 acres.
17, okay.
And Sam, it's 612 units. Is that what I'm reading?
That's what was pulling up, yes, on residency for the existing, but again, that doesn't reflect any of the existing or the proposed developments that are being constructed. I can, of course, I'll double check all of these numbers with the consultant when we get there, but this is kind of a rough estimate off of what I could do with residency.
Okay, thank you.
And the final district acreage and proposed density numbers, of course, are going to be, well, the acreage would be set based off of whatever districts you decide. But the density is going to be reflective of how many stories. Like, let's say on Albion, right now it's set up to go to 2 stories. If you wanted to do 3, that could potentially bring in more. So if you have any questions, let me know.
I'm going to let Mr. McCauley ask a quick question here, okay?
I wasn't sure.
Well, the format is you can't, but I'm letting you.
Well, I know there's somebody else going to ask a question. So it seems that in the middle, on Foundry Street, there's some properties that have been left out, but it seems to like gerrymander all the way around it. So I'm just wondering what was the premise of leaving those properties out?
You mean around Lake Street?
Between Lake Street and Foundry Street, there's a section of white there, which I think is left out of the district that you drew.
Yep, I think that's some of those were existing single family buildings. That particular one on the corner, maybe Steve.
Can you go back to the other shot? It might be easier for me to see. Aerial.
Yeah, the one at the corner of Maple Street and Foundry.
Cuts in, that whole section's carved out. I'm just wondering.
I think part of that again is single families that we didn't want to change. And I think there's also, isn't there a like a station in one of them that would?
Yeah, so there's a substation right
station
there.
Or substation or something that we could.
Yeah, and we can't, I just pulled it up on Street View.
Yeah.
We can't include those properties. They would give us acreage, but they're not going to give us any units. So we did not include that particular site, which is also parking, I think, utilized for something else. But yeah, that one is excluded. And then the next building over is right here, which I believe is either multifamily or commercial, but not included. We were aiming, as others had requested, to try to capture some of the existing development and be in keeping with some of the existing character area. We tried to stay off of Lake Street, which is primarily single family with some 2 families. If you look at the density map, it shows some of it here, but they're not anywhere near the density that Foundry Street would be, which is 5 stories tall, with a more commercial kind of industrial setback, similar to what is currently being developed there currently. And or the pending permits that are going forward. So having a much smaller setback, having a higher building, we wanted to try to maintain the character area of Lake Street versus having too much of that creep come off of Foundry Street.
And my comment there, Sam, would be that that's consistent with what I've always hoped we would do here, is try to carve out the residential as much as possible. And that gets into the character, you know, you're not necessarily going to want a 5-story anything plopping up on top of some of these smaller lots or on top of these residential character zones. You know, unfortunately for some of them, they are very close to the commercial right now. I think the other one was probably the Ballister substation, which, you know, gets kind of tricky because that's then, I think, part of the energy park is that the gas and light, I think that might.
It's gonna be a pocket
It's
park.
gonna be a pocket park.
Yeah.
So we've probably been doing it in a pocket park, no matter who owns it. Not currently versed in who the ownership is ultimately gonna be. Is it gonna be the town or is it gonna be gas and light? But either way, you know, that's not something we want to include it.
Yeah, unless there's an active plan to surplus or convert some municipal land, we're actually not allowed to include it in the districts. Last I heard.
And that is going to be a park, so.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. That's a good exclusion, I think. Did I answer your question, Mr. McCollum? Yes, thank you. Okay.
We also included in this district, it's kind of up near the blue section there. You can see it's high density on the map there. That's the existing apartment building on the corner of Tuttle and Chestnut. Been there for since I can remember anyway. And again, you know, I think one of the questions we asked, why aren't we getting credit for anything we've done before? This is kind of a way to get credit for it.
It's a bit of a way.
Yeah. And that's the building if anybody wants their memory jogged.
Yeah, and we also have in there, I believe, Steve, we have the laundromat that's already under construction.
Yeah, the laundromat, it's under construction. We also have the building on the east side of Foundry Street that's under construction.
Right, so when Samantha says it's 612, it's 612
Right.
plus what's already under construction. So that number could be a little bit higher, or, you know, not insignificantly higher.
Yeah. It likely wouldn't be too significantly different. But again, I will verify all of this with the consultant with getting the actual shape files to make sure that all the boundaries are the same for whatever we're pulling. But the numbers and the density with the proposed, the two that are under construction right now would only increase by, what is it, 65 units, Steve?
I think we have 65 units are in those two buildings. So 55 and then 10.
And those are, again, included in the area.
Any other questions on the Foundry District from councilors?
I'm thinking about this from the perspective of how can we gain the greatest compliance with the least impact, which I think is really one of the guiding principles for the work that we're doing. So I wonder, Sam, whether there is some sort of methodology or formula we can use that ends up kind of scoring each of these. Like, for instance, I know there are a couple like intangibles. Like, we don't know what the future of development on Foundry will look like, but we do know that's going to happen regardless. So I think the idea of assuming greater density in Foundry is a safe bet, regardless of whether we include that as a part of any district. But it does seem like for the acreage and the capacity we have, this would get us a very long way towards a minimum compliance model, but have the least impact of anything we've talked about, you know, of any of the other areas. I mean, perhaps Audubon Road is maybe, you know, up there as well, although I don't know that the numbers are quite as compelling, you know, but still very compelling. So I don't know, you know, put it to the whole subcommittee. I don't know what sort of it's almost like scoring, but in a way it becomes just like a methodology that we apply across each of these proposed districts to kind of, almost rate them, if you will, based upon yielding the highest number of potential units to meet the minimum compliance, but having the most limited impact, on the community, on the neighborhoods, or the character of the neighborhood we're talking about. North Ave's a little bit different because I know, Mike, you've oftentimes mentioned like the boat shop, for instance, right across from the train. Does that feel like an appropriate place to have housing, like with mixed use? It would seem so, right? I mean, that's a business corridor. Single family, single level commercial, literally across from the train station on North Ave, feels like perhaps underutilization, right? And so the idea of being able to maintain the commercial on the first floor, but then have housing above it would seem to make logical sense if we're going to have to make choices to propose. So I don't know if there's a way, Sam, to perhaps think about that again, understanding it's not an exact science, but thinking about, all right, where can we kind of score this so we get to a minimum compliance, no more, but also the quality of the residents being least impacted. And I feel like looking at this, Foundry and Audubon seem like two where it's not going to really materially change what's already happened or could happen in those areas. But if that's what it's going to take, to Steve's point about getting us credit going forward, I'm incredibly cognizant of the fact that people don't want to have this sort of mandate in any way, shape, or form impact the character and quality of their lives or their neighborhoods. And I think if we can find a way to tangibly quantify that by showing that certain of these would have more of an impact than others, I think it helps people to make a more informed choice.
Yeah, we're actually doing that, Ed. So we're
Great.
For instance, like Foundry Street, I think that Sam goes back to her initial slide showing how many units we're getting credit for, 775. Probably right now, with what's already approved and under construction in that area, we're probably close to 700 now existing, 675. So
yeah, I guess like that's the column,
yeah,
Steve.
Exactly.
So take it one more column to add that. So we say, okay, in practical terms, we're getting
right.
credit for 775. We've already got 760, 770 there anyway.
Right.
So,
and by the way, more could be built now.
Yeah.
In going down that street too. So
yeah.
that's kind of, we're trying to score that for each neighborhood, and it's pretty close.
I think that's important because while I understand people are concerned about overdevelopment in Foundry, there is candidly already overdevelopment in Foundry, in a Foundry area from my perspective. And just the way that, and that's just a function of, special permits and whatever the case might be, but that's where we find ourselves already with that. So I think if we're taking existing conditions and looking at, all right, how do we minimize future impact, that really stands out. But so I think you're right to point that out, Steve. And I think adding another column of, all right, how actual versus what we would gain from that, I think is a really important piece to this for residents to be able to be clear-eyed about their decision making.
Absolutely.
I think too, to your point, Councilor Dombrowski, I would also point out that I think we've minimized with some of the things we're proposing here, like Albion, North Ave, Greenwood. Greenwood is 2 stories and it's essentially a commercial district. That's not a huge change. Now we can always do some tweaking and make Greenwood 3 stories. And take it away somewhere else if we thought that we were, doing too much to Greenwood, but I don't think we are. When you look at Albion and North Ave, we want to retain that commercial feel on the first stories of North Ave. But we're saying you could build up a couple stories above that. But when you look down the street, the Tonneau building, I call it the Tonneau building, it's not called the Tonneau building. That building is much higher. if you look into Albion Street, right behind Albion Street, there's I think a 5-story condo building. So what we're looking at proposing on Albion is actually, if you will, much smaller than some of the existing. So I see that as a positive. That's why we only get 50 units out of Albion. That's, why we get 156 out of North Ave, whereas we get many, many more out of some of the larger areas. And certainly we could probably get more than 323 out of Greenwood if we restructured it. But now we've got it as 2 stories. And, there was I think a 37-acre parcel that was looked at by the last working group in Greenwood, although they declined to do anything with that 37 acres around the train station. We're really narrowing the amount that we're proposing to the public to use around Greenwood. The acreage is much smaller. So I think we're attempting to reach a pretty good balance right now with, getting as skinny as it is. We're at 101.5%. That's not a big buffer, which is fine with me. If we can get it approved with 1% less, I'll go with that. But I think we're right in the zone. We're proposing this where we should be.
And I agree with that, Chairman McLean too. And to the point with Steve, talking about where we are in terms of existing, if we have another column and next to Greenwood, it says 323, but it says 323 in this column, the column next to it ends up saying like 290, in terms of what is existing. Then we know, because of the 323 would be what would be counted. But if we already have 290 or 300 there, then it would not materially change Greenwood as much, but if the Greenwood, or if the Audubon number says 418, we could realize, but there's only 52, currently, then obviously that would materially change things, relative to that. But I think the opportunity to also apportion this across the town, so it's not just Foundry, North Ave, Albion centric, is also something to think about, because any potential additional units are going to create some of the issues we've talked about, traffic and the like. And so I think that's another consideration. But I think having that added column would help us see, okay, these are, in a way, they almost become like phantom units, if you will, in that they're not likely to be constructed. However, they do meet the compliance requirements.
George, what I'd say to that is we're open to proposals. I mean, if someone, I know when, out by the lake had initially been mentioned, there was some public concern over that. That's no longer on the chart. So, if there were other areas, I know when we looked at Audubon, we couldn't use a lot of it because of the wetlands and so forth, the hydrology. So we had to kind of focus where we're focusing. But if there was another area where we could get 25%, a larger percentage outside of the 3 circles or the 3 train station zones, that would be great. We're not Amesbury, so I don't know that we could. But, we certainly, a lot of people in town have looked at this for a very long time. I think we're reaching the point where, if anybody has any other ideas, we're more than willing to hear them. And we're more than willing to hear them again at our next public forum. Although at some point, we're going to have to make final decisions.
Sam, I have a question for you, if I may. The 418 on Audubon, looking at the 75% rule, what percentage is that 418 of the 1722 that you have on there?
It's 27%, so it might have to come down slightly. Well, no, I'm sorry. I did the math wrong. Hold on. 24%.
Okay, so we're fine there. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Yeah, so one thing to keep in mind too with all the moving numbers, and I can have this chart is from the consultant. I can have them build it out, Mr. Dombrowski, so you can see more of the detail that you were talking about for next a public forum or whatnot, and next opportunities for public reviews. But the one thing to keep in mind is that 25%, 50%, and all those different calculations that we're throwing around, that it has to be 50% of the total unit count, and 50% of the acreage.
Acreage, right?
So yeah, so we have to keep, again, it's as Mr. McLean brought up earlier, it's kind of like whack-a-mole. You just kind of have to keep making sure that every time you adjust one thing, we're compensating elsewhere, so that we are continuously getting close to those as close to those minimums as we can, as has been requested.
I think actually, Sam, that's the most important thing. Like the mindset that it's going into this now is very different, and so you have your clear direction in terms of how we put this together in such a way that we have minimal compliance and minimal impact on communities. I mean, on the neighborhoods within the community. So I think you get that, which is a real, I think, important step that this subcommittee is endeavoring to pursue now. So I appreciate the fact that as you're talking about this, you're referencing minimal compliance and then thinking about, okay, how do we also have minimal impact? And I think that's the next step of this. Minimal compliance is pretty much understood to be the requirement now of the subcommittee. But now, from my perspective, how do we also have the minimal impact on the neighborhoods that might be either within these zones or in any way affected by them? And I think you're well on your way to doing that. And I completely agree with Chairman McLean. These are not the only options we have. If someone has another idea, let's run the numbers. Let's see if we can make that work. This is, there are no preconceived notions here of the subcommittee, aside from minimal compliance is our ceiling, not our floor.
And I would add that an example of that is that the last time we met, we were looking at Richardson Water and Armory, which I think it was 65 units. And we asked you with 3 stories, and we asked you to look at Albion instead, and you've come back with Albion here, giving us 50 units. It's hard for me to read this. I'm sorry, I'm on my phone. So there's an example of how we've changed. And I agree with Councilor Dombrowski. We want to look at minimum compliance and minimal impact. And that's why I like the numbers that we see and the attention we've paid to Audubon and Foundry. So, yeah, we certainly are flexible in other ideas that folks have in terms of what this map should look like. But I like the direction, certainly like the direction that we're going in. And I'm pleased that you came up with that 1722 right now, which is, I think, if I did my math right, is only 26 units over the minimal requirement of 1696. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
yes.
That's an excellent job of you got to have a little bit of cover in case the state comes back and takes something out. But I like the fact that you put the minimal amount of buffer in there. Very good job.
Anything else on the maps? Did you have something, Steve?
I was gonna say, you might want to mention anybody that's online in the public comment generally.
Yeah, well, are we moving into public?
Well, whatever you want to do.
I was thinking of taking public engagement after Samantha went through item number 5, review character areas, because it just seemed to make sense to me to talk about character areas first.
Yeah, I can go over that really quick. So one of the things I wanted to bring people's attention to is kind of what the visual of these units could look like. Most people know what mixed use looks like, but if somebody's not doing mixed use, kind of where does this fall? It's referred to as middle housing because it's not the high rise, and it's not necessarily, aside from the area where you'd be looking at doing that, and it's not detached single family. So here are a variety of different ways to give you some visuals. You have slightly larger buildings, you have smaller buildings, you have clusters here, all variants of what could be potentially brought into the bylaw. We have individual control over some components of it. We need to have a minimum of 4 units typically, but this kind of just helps you to think about other potentials. This is another example of how you could get those units. So this is actually from a article on Strong Towns website, which is a great resource if you want to go look it up. But this particular one shows when you're combining near residential, or if you're trying to have a less visual or height obtrusive kind of building, you have there's an actual six actual units inside this building. This is a standard residential lot. So there's 3 50-foot wide lots, 135 foot deep. It's not entirely atypical development in a more kind of commercial or urban area. Anyway, this one in particular has studio duplexes in the back and then a 6-plex in the front. So it's 8 units. These are studio units. They're not big, huge luxury units like are being built elsewhere. It's just another option, again, to help you kind of see what this could potentially look like. And this would be a cluster. So you'd have to keep this particular one in the front. This is, again, a single family lot. It has a 1-bedroom cottage in the back, and then studio duplex or studio cottages in the front, and kind of allows for individual units and more of an individual feel with less of that more, which I think a lot of people were really concerned about, still maintaining some open space and some green space. They're just different ways to potentially achieve that. So just some visuals to talk a little bit about the varied types of housing that could be seen. And then going into talking about the character area, again, you have areas when you drive around Wakefield that are more residential. You have areas that are more industrial historically. You have areas that are like recreation, like around Lake Quannapowitt. And then you're going to have more of your commercial downtown character areas. And then you might have, like, up by 95, there's the commercial office park kind of character area. They're just the way a character area works is trying to kind of maintain uses in various areas and maintain the overall development patterns that have existed and kind of defined a town or city over time. So in an effort to try to help maintain the residential character area, a lot of that has been pulled out of this particular plan that we reviewed tonight, the potential districts, and focused more on the commercial character areas and trying to incorporate more mixed use or reflect existing development that's already been done at a higher density, like on Foundry or up on Audubon, where there's already a higher density development area. So those would be anything built in like a neighborhood commercial character area would be something that's mixed use, like what you find downtown. The things along Albion in North Ave would be the same. Those are commercial character areas that are trying to aim to maintain that first floor commercial space. So you have that online engagement with the pedestrian in the street. And then having that residential component above. And then you would have a character area on Foundry. So where they're visually broken up. That's part of why they're being presented as 3 separate districts, with Foundry, North Ave, and then Albion Street, is because the way that you would define those is different. The heights are different. The setbacks might be slightly different. And you want to try to maintain some consistency through the use of these character areas. So again, that's part of why they're broken up into different districts, because what is being currently built or has been built on Foundry, you probably don't want to see all of Albion be bought up and turned into just a very large 5-story apartment building. And that's, again, not in keeping with the existing development character or the character area of a commercial, neighborhood commercial kind of downtown feeling. So that was one way that we could have a little bit more diversity in the groups, rather than just saying it's all 4 units across the board, or all mixed use across the board, or option for mixed use across the board, where then you'd end up with the risk of having a mixed use building in the middle of a residential area, this allows us to kind of divide it up to help make sure that, again, we're maintaining the existing character area, which has been continuously shared with us through the public comment of surveys and the forum and in these meetings. So that answers kind of the basics of character areas. Let me know if you have any specific questions about character areas.
Let me start with the counselors. Any questions from the counselors on character areas?
Not right now, no.
I am actually interested, Sam, in kind of how this plays into the state mandate relative to this, because I know that there were a lot of, requirements relative to, space and acreage and size and height and all the things that were kind of talked about. But I don't recall there really being much in the way of ways in which, when we're talking about as a matter of right, ways in which to kind of enforce or recognize the character of a particular area. So how would we be able to structure something, within a bylaw when we're dealing with as a matter of right that allows for, accounting for character and candidly taste within a particular area or neighborhood?
Yeah, so the way that this would be done is you would have them listed as separate districts. So it shows up as one contiguous district or counts as one contiguous district with the state and EOHLC, but the way that is for us and enforcing it and dealing with it is you would have your map of the one big main contiguous district, have it color coded like it is now. And so you have the boundary area, and then you would have its own section of the code. So whether we call it Foundry Street District or I don't know, industrial, residential, I don't know. That's up to you. But the point is, then you would have 5 stories be permitted. Let's say existing development is a 0 front setback. And so that's what you're going to go with. And then side is 10 feet and the rear is 15. I don't know, I'm just throwing numbers out.
Sure.
But you would, everything within that boundary of the Foundry District would utilize that. Now, if you pop over to North Ave, let's say, North Ave, we definitely want to make sure we have 0 setbacks for the front because that's commercial character area. But they would also have the use mandated separately that the first floor has to be commercial. And whether that's retail, office, restaurant is beside the point. It's that the first floor space is online, meaning it's a space that you can engage with as the public versus private. Private space would be like a residential unit. And then you would have the residential above. So by creating these different districts and calling them something different, it's allowing for us to differentiate the character of these areas and being able to have kind of effectively different regulations for each of them. So it's a lot of work in the code to spell out the zoning code and all of its various components for this. But it is what we would I think behoove and kind of meet the goals and objectives of both the public as well as the subcommittee for trying to maintain that overall character and really utilize the existing development patterns as best we can.
And is that all needing to be defined and refined by year's end, or is it a matter of just establishing the zone by year end?
The bylaw
right? That goes into character area. So that would, since it's part of the bylaw, we'd have it's the whole kit and caboodle then.
Yes, the bylaw would need to be filed with the map by the deadline that we have from the state to maintain compliance.
Because the sense that I get from a lot of residents, obviously there are mixed opinions on this. A lot of folks are not in favor of compliance at all, which I respect. A lot of folks are also willing to look at minimum compliance, but want to make sure we have minimal impact. But I think one of the challenges that we had last time is there was that I think a 3-story unit that was constructed on Chestnut, the lower part, the other side of the tracks, going on the west side, and it was that white building we might be familiar with. It's incredibly tall. It doesn't fit with it at all within the character. And that was used, and it was selling for like $750,000 a unit. So for a lot of reasons, it really, I don't think was a very particularly compelling example as of why statewide compliance, or statewide mandates are reasonable. But that to me stands out as something where that just doesn't fit within the character of that, densely populated single family and, maybe two family, area for the most part. So I think that's an important component to this, to be able to help folks visualize, if we did a minimum compliance model, this is really what the bylaw law would provide for in these various areas. I don't know that as many people would take issue with Albion being mixed use with commercial on the first floor and then say 2 stories of housing above that. I think especially if we had smaller units, if we're talking studios, we're not talking about adding kids to the school system, for instance. I know that that's something we're not supposed to, I guess, ultimately, I don't think we can consider that in this, but I think in practical terms, the community will ask about it. So I think we have to be able to at least have a response. I know that can't drive the decision-making, but when you mentioned even the 6 units, if those are all studios, that has a different impact on a neighborhood than if you have a 3 or 4 bedroom unit, for instance. It's just different. And Albion that stretch is rather quiet, I would say. So the idea of having a more robust commercial corridor coupled with some housing that would support that corridor, I think goes along the lines of what a lot of people would probably be more accepting of if they were to accept, this kind of development mandate. So the more we can kind of explore that and relay that to the public, I think that's a really important piece, and also solicit, public input on that. Because I know people are envisioning, to your point, a 5-story apartment building going in next door to them, and they have good reason to be concerned about, that sort of unreasonable development. And I think a lot of people have a really sour taste after seeing the height issues with Albion, with Foundry, and how that's impacted. And it's called the cruise ship for a reason, because it has really stood out to people as a really bad decision in terms of how many stories. And that was, I understand, by special permit, but I think ZBA got that wrong. And I think most people are in agreement now that it's too high for that area, and it's set a new bar now for other developers to come in. So I think we can't underestimate how important that the character areas are going to be, and the sensitivities that would surround that for residents, and the right to be concerned about it.
Just a couple of points on that, Councilor. A couple of interesting points that you make. I had quite a bit of discussion about the house on Chestnut during the last cycle. And I think we should keep in mind, though, that Foundry Street and that house on Chestnut Street were part of our current zoning, didn't have anything to do with 40A.
Right.
And in addition to that, I do not think under this law we can eliminate, that we can dictate the amount of bedrooms. I think that's pretty clear under 40A Section 3A. So I think, I think there are elements that we can do, and there are things that we cannot do. And I think that's one of the ones that, we couldn't make it all studios. It's just not allowed. I would prefer that, but I would prefer not being here in the first place. but I think the law pretty clearly states we can't dictate the amount of bedrooms. I would also point out, though, that when we focus on this building on Audubon, talk about character, that is a residential building now. That the commercial character there may have changed a little bit, because 14 Albion is now very, very large 14 Audubon is very, very large residential development. But I prefer to keep commercial based where and when we can. So by focusing on that one area, we are focusing on residential. I'd also just point out that I think the progress we've made here is also shown by the fact that we had 3 plans last time. I'm not going to get into drilling down on them, but I think the acreage was roughly 112 to 142 acres, somewhere in that vicinity, depending on which plan we're talking about. The total acreage here, even though it might be a little larger than I would like, I'd love to put all this within 36 acres if we could, is still going to be well below even the minimum district proposed in the last cycle, because of where we're focusing. So I consider that a positive, me personally. Anything else from the counselors? If not, I'm going to go back to number 4, which I wanted to review character areas first, but sorry. So we'll go to public engagement. Steve, do we have anybody online?
If anybody would put their hand up, or I can do that.
Show of hands.
So far, oh, I got one.
Okay, general idea is to just give us your name and address, and this isn't town council, we don't limit you to 3 minutes, although, we don't want to go half hour either talking about every issue the town has.
Brian McGrail, can you unmute yourself, Brian?
I can. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, there you go.
I didn't look at you.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Brian.
Hi, everyone. Well, thank you for all the hard work you're doing on this. I think you're doing a great job vetting this through. I just wanted to, I guess, have a couple of questions, and probably to Sam. It's in, because I've worked on this in other communities. I actually permitted one of these projects in Arlington on Monday night under their bylaw. And it seems that what we're going towards is it's going to be multiple, it's going to be different overlay districts that are going to have, that are going to be utilized to comply with the MBTA requirement. So
Very similar to, having different overlay districts
Which
because
is-
they'll all have their own regulations.
they'll have their own regulate, yeah, so, okay, so, the thing I just want to, I think you're doing a great job with the maps and vetting this. I just would respectfully recommend not to lose track of, as Councilor Dombrowski talked about earlier, that this is going to be a significant task on drafting the bylaw itself. So this is not all about the maps. I have followed this through many communities. I read every letter that comes out from the Attorney General's office. If you go online, you can see all of their letters when they're approving or denying MBTA community bylaws. And as Councilor Dombrowski alluded to, and I think this was kind of a little bit of a problem with the earlier version. Everybody seems to focus on the map. And then at the end, oh, gee, we need language for a bylaw. And this is going to be compounded by the fact that you're going to have multiple overlay districts. So it's not just going to be one amendment. You're going to have various components that are going to have to be drafted, and they're going to have to be drafted to also work with our existing bylaw and not mess that up for other uses and so forth in there. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. I'm sure you have that on your radar. Councilor Dombrowski mentioned it, but it's going to be a pretty big task to do that. And I think, I don't know where you stand with that, if anyone's thought about that, if that process has started.
Do you have a place in mind?
I'm sorry.
I think that was between us.
Oh,
Yeah, Brian, I've been losing sleep over this too, so I understand. Yeah, we've been talking about it.
Yeah, so I just wanted to point that out. As a citizen, I've drafted a number of bylaws. I know our bylaw very well. So as a citizen, I'm going to be happy to participate and help with that. I hope we're all successful as a town to get through this. And I appreciate the work that you're doing, and I think we're very much going in the right direction here. So, but I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, and just as a quick background, I've actually worked on zoning overlays in other municipalities and rewrites with character areas. So I'm actually relatively familiar with one way to kind of navigate around this. I know there are some other municipalities have also done it, and we have our consultant to help kind of at least get some of it together. But Brian, I'm appreciative of the offer to be involved. There's going to be a lot to do.
Yeah, as a citizen, just, participatory with
yes.
everybody else, but I have somewhat of a specialty in it. So, and then, because I look at every MBTA letter that comes out of the Attorney General's office on bylaws that are either approved or denied by the AG. And where they run into problems is the text of the bylaw more than the map. So I would be ashamed to have maps that comply and then have them have a problem with that bylaw itself. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Are you offering a first draft, Counselor?
Well, no, because I want it to be done, but then I can help with where it might conflict with our existing bylaw or things that are missing or need to be thought about. So, and I guess the only other question I had is there been discussion about an affordable component to this at all?
So in order for us to have yes, but there's a caveat. So the MBTA communities was originally written with a 10% affordable component. Or permits a 10% affordable component for all municipalities. Anything above 10%, even if you have inclusionary zoning or you utilize more than 10% for any of your other projects and have shown that it works well in your community, you have to have what's called an economic feasibility analysis, or an EFA. And so in order for us to go above that 10% threshold, we have to do an EFA. The timeline turnaround for that, in addition to trying to get all of the maps and bylaws and public meetings and whatnot, just was unrealistic. And there are only a handful of consultants that are doing them. So right now we're looking at a 10% component, just because we haven't been able to find a way to increase it without utilizing an EFA at this point.
Yeah, I think that's very smart. I'm seeing all the other bylaws I've seen from other communities are doing similar. That they're putting the 10%, but they're looking that they'll probably go back and amend it later once they have time. So that seems very, very smart to me. So that's all I had. Thank you.
And
What other
can
questions?
I just add one thing, Chair McLean?
Sure,
I'm driving, so I'm
absolutely.
not even on anything, right? We also have to bear in mind that our zoning bylaws are undergoing changes right now, which will probably be brought up at the spring town meeting. So all the more reason we have to consult with the bylaws review committee and Mr. Brabowski, who's the expert from Concord, who's helping us change our zoning bylaws. Because it's one thing that it has to comport with the current zoning bylaws, but we have to be mindful that the current zoning bylaws are in all likelihood going to undergo substantial changes sometime in the spring of 2025 and the fall of 2025. Did
Here's
I
my
lose
one-
you? Will?
My one question, there, actually going back to something Mr. McGrail was speaking about, would be, if we have a 10% affordability component, would it be applicable to some of our districts but not others?
For
Something
the,
us
some
to
of the,
think about.
so that, the 10%, the things that you have control over within the MBTA communities umbrella is that you get to choose the minimum number of units that 10% applies to. You could, I think, have it as low as 4 units. Once you hit 4 units, they need to have one that's affordable. And I don't know exactly, as much as I've read on the affordability, it rounds up. So you'd have to have one affordable unit. Whether or not that's feasible is an entirely different answer. But the applicability, excuse me, of that 10% is going to fall back on our bylaws. And so if we have all of, or whatever our bylaw is that gets proposed, if we have these various character areas, it will be up to you on what you want to put forward. If you want it in all of them and you want a 10% and you want to have no, your minimum is whatever the lowest density is for that particular character area, then that's something that you can put forward. The state does review it there are some feasibility and components that we don't have the luxury of time to be able to have them review it and give us feedback prior to submitting it. But you can always put it in there and then see what happens. It's just going to be up to the group to give some guidance on it. And I already have it on my calendar next week, actually, to start working on kind of an outline of different components of the bylaw and decisions that you'll need to make. Because whether we're going forward with a map or not, we do need to at least have some basics getting to the ball rolling.
Any other public participation online, Steve?
Not at the moment. Everybody's muted, so.
Anything else over to my right?
If I may, Scott McCauley, 32 Walden Road. I have a bunch of different questions and points, and I'll try not to exceed my 30 minutes that the councilors are and so you mentioned on Albion Street, about it being mixed use, not mandated. And there was some things I wanted to, I brought up before, is that I hadn't seen anywhere where a mandatory mixed use was, and I asked if I could be directed to that. The reason I bring this up is because in mixed use, and not the mandatory, but what I did see in mixed use is that it also has to be multifamily by right. So all of Albion Street as a mixed use needs to be also multifamily by right. So you potentially could lose a lot of commercial real estate value taxation if they decide to change their commercial real estate to residential. But that being said, can you use that clause of it being multifamily by right on that Albion Street corridor to treat those as units and not commercial? Because it says it also can be multifamily by right. So that's just something that I'm not that I'm in favor of this whole thing, but I'm looking for creative ideas, and I'm just throwing some stuff out there. The other thing is that I asked before.
Well, let's stop at that for a moment, because Samantha, I think, has indicated that there's a separate category, and I guess what you're saying is you haven't been able to find it.
Which I haven't been able to find. Yes.
Could you help Mr. McCauley find the mandatory?
I didn't know it was a real question. I thought it was, my apologies, because I thought it was a rhetorical question as part of your argument last time. I'm happy to send that to you and get that information over to you via email if that's, I just don't have your email. So if you can either send me an email or maybe Steve can forward your email address to me.
Yep.
I'm happy to follow up on that. I can either answer your questions one at a time, or I can continue to write them down and answer them all at the end.
So I'd be happy if you want to email me that with the link to the mandatory. I'm just putting it out there because all I've seen is mixed use can also be multifamily, which kind of plays into some of what you're talking about. And the mandatory, I'd be interested to see, because I haven't found that. So, and I did send an email of a week or so back about the survey, because I asked at this meeting last time if the results of the survey could be made available to me, and I did send to you and to you as well. And
it never came to me. So my apologies for wherever it got lost in the internet, because I was actually looking up your name, trying to verify that I was spelling it correctly in the minutes, and I don't have any emails from you. So yes, if you want to email me and make sure it's spelled with 2 L's and 2 T's, I'm happy to get that to you. Your first question about the mandatory mixed use component, about the regulations versus the mixed use that we're looking at for Albion Street. The two different options, you're correct. The mandatory mixed use will be required along North Ave. And then on Albion Street, there is the potential for either 2 stories of just residential or 2 stories. And you can do the way that you can kind of incentivize mixed use is by offering that first floor as a wash. So you could go up to 3 stories if you're adding the mixed use component. You could, and these are again, not things that are going to be done. They're just examples of ways that you can incentivize it. You could say for the first floor that if it's commercial, there's no parking requirement or a reduced parking requirement. You can offer different setbacks for commercial versus residential so that there could be a higher density. There are a variety of different ways that can be worked into the code, which is also part of why I'm trying to start looking at those pieces and what the subcommittee really wants to include as an incentive to try to maintain the commercial component on Albion. The reason why we did not go after mandatory mixed use on Albion ties back to the acreage. We need to have that 50% contiguous. And if we ended up changing Albion Street over to mandatory mixed use, not only do we have to apply for that approval with the state, but we'd also have to then possibly look at making the Foundry area larger in order to compensate for that loss in 7 acres, which is possible. These are all things that are possible, but just trying to think about all the different components and kind of share where the train of thought is going. And as for calculating the number on Albion Street, if you have, let's say, there's the 50 units from Albion Street, and that's related to 2 stories of, it's whatever the highest potential is. So 2 stories of residential. If they choose, if the subcommittee chooses to put forward the incentive for the mixed use, then you'd still get to count those 2 stories of residential, because that first floor commercial is a wash at that point. It doesn't count obviously towards a residential unit. Sorry, somebody fell earlier today outside. So that's something that we would be looking at, well, we, meaning the subcommittee, would be looking at on how they want to incentivize that to try to count it. But you are correct in that typically mixed use would be allowed by right alongside residential. You just try to incentivize the mixed use so that you can maintain that commercial floor, commercial first floor space online.
But so it can be allowed alongside, but it didn't specifically say that. It said it had to by right be one or the other. So say like the LA Arm building that's on Albion Street, that could be, somebody could put a second story on that and then have it rezoned to be all residential. Now you've lost that commercial real estate, commercial tax base. But, you know,
Sure, it's totally something to think of. But that's again part of why we try to find ways to incentivize people to do mixed use. Like if you could have, if a property owner, developer, landlord, whatever, had a building that had a 0 parking requirement, and I'm not saying that that's what's getting proposed, but just this is one of the examples again. If there was a 0 parking requirement for the first floor, and so you could go and put in a coffee shop or a bank or a lawyer's office or a restaurant and not have to worry about your parking requirement because it's the first floor. You just have to provide parking for the residential 1 space per bedroom or whatever it is. For the units above, most of them are likely going to choose that because it makes their property more valuable. Now, of course, we don't have 100% control over it. And again, because it's not a mandatory mixed use, we can't mandate it. But those are just ways, that's the zoning tools that we have. We have only so many tools in our toolbox. The zoning and planning tools are incentivizing it as best we can.
So Sam, would the incentivization be set up in?
This thing's popping on its wing.
Would it be a zoning change? I mean, what would
It would be,
This thing
it would,
popping off.
yes, I know, I'll fix it later. It would be set up as part of the initial bylaw. And as kind of like a for lack of a better term.
That's something we could work on.
If you, yeah, and that's part of why I want to start working on, start working on these different components sooner than later and try to make a list of different pieces. I'm also going to put a call out to see if anybody who has gotten them passed more recently has some additional tips. I have some from a while ago, but how they're incentivizing mixed use on the first floor to help increase the chance that we're able to keep that first floor space online on Albion Street.
Nope, sure, go right ahead, please.
And then also I asked prior, and I wasn't sure if we found out whether there was some question whether specialized energy codes would apply to this construction on these new units, and did we find out whether?
I don't think, why would it?
Well,
For
there was some
everything, yeah.
question in there that I read that any type of energy type thing may not be required for this zone, so I wasn't sure.
I haven't seen that anyway.
Well, if the specialized energy code does apply, within that code, there's requirement is 1 EV charging station per unit, so how does that work?
Oh, when in a multi
Well,
family?
if you have multi-use areas in the specialized energy code, well, you're supposed to have a charging station per unit. How does that work?
Scott, if you don't mind speaking a little louder, actually the microphone's not picking up all of the
Sorry, I was
words.
switching the specialized energy code, if it does apply to these areas, within that code, there's a requirement to have 1 EV charging station per unit. So I'm not sure how that would work in like multi-use areas that might not have parking per a unit. And is it required to because of that?
I'm gonna have to check on that. I didn't realize that was in the code. I'm not doubting you, but that's,
That was one of the things that was brought up the last time.
okay.
Yeah, so one of the components, so that's something that would come under zoning and building inspection. And I'm actually working, once we start to get the basics of the bylaw outlined, then I'll be able to meet with them and review and see where the clashing and the red flags are, or some potential issues might be, so that we can better address that through whether or not it can be addressed, whether or not it needs to be addressed, if that component is applicable to these areas, all of that stuff, because I don't know all, and nobody knows all of the code inside and out 100%. I don't think. Maybe Brian does. But the all the various components, and of people who are dealing with this on a day-to-day basis, it's a good conversation to have. So it's part of why I want to try to get that ball rolling, starting to talk on these different components, because I deal primarily with the longer range planning components and the planning side of writing the code, and then we kind of hand it off. So I'm happy to look at that as well, trying to figure out how much of that would impact. And again, it will any type of parking requirement would be discussed as part of the overlay. So that is something that can be kind of outlined as one of the parts of the bylaw, one of the different criteria.
I guess I'd say to that too, Mr. McCauley, is I hear what you're saying. Interesting thing is, we do have inspectional services, right, Steve? So you can check on this, and hopefully they're a little more up to speed. But I remember from town meeting, I remember the discussions about the stretch code. And I guess the bottom line will be, people are putting EV chargers in their houses, some are, some aren't. This would probably be a cost element. I guess then one could argue it either way. If somebody doesn't want to see this further development, then the cost may be prohibitive, and maybe the most of the development will happen. On the other hand, if it is cost effective to a builder and they're required to deal with, the new EV charger and the additional cost of an electrician and an install, then it would happen. And whether there's enough space for it and so forth, that's a very detailed situation that we'd all have to look into. We have chargers throughout town, but if there's one required on the property, or for each of these units, then it's something that would go into the building the decision whether to do that expansion and whether to build it up. And if we have incentives on the first floor and parking isn't an issue there, then I guess that would probably relate, wouldn't it, then to the residential units.
I just had one question about the Greenwood map. It looked like the Greenwood Fire Station property is included in that map. Are we looking into mixed use with the Greenwood Fire Station?
I don't think it should be. Maybe it is. Where's the fire station, Steve?
One property back on Oak.
I can't see it.
I have trouble seeing streets on these maps.
Second property back on Oak Street, right there. I believe that's the fire station.
Not that one. All right, look, we can check that. That's fine. We can pull that back. Good catch.
I mean, if you wanted to mix use the fire station on the first floor.
We could.
You can do some,
I think they'd make us, I think they'd make us pull that out.
You can't do it specific for elderly, so I was gonna say.
If it's in there, we'll pull it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see which one you're talking about. Yes, it is included. It wouldn't count or be able to be utilized, so we can remove that.
Good catch.
Good catch.
Sam, can I just ask, I know that there was an email that had come through from a resident, and it was a question relating to the need to exceed, under the MBTA Communities Act, the maximum of 25% of housing stock for multifamily housing. Have you had a chance to take a look at that yet? Because she was basically of the opinion that we're at about 23% currently. So I think she was trying to understand how that requirement of not needing to exceed 25% of of multifamily housing as a percentage of our housing stock relates to this. So if you haven't yet, if you could maybe take a look at that and then let us know, because she seems to be of the opinion, and I don't know either way, but I think it's an interesting point she makes that we're at 23% right now, and we have a 25% threshold. She sent, it looks like this was an email that I think we all had received from this resident just this morning. So you may not have seen it or had a chance to take a look, but if you could next, for the next meeting, just provide some insight to us, that'd be helpful.
And can you forward that? Because I didn't get it.
I don't know that I got that.
I can. It was 8:01 this morning.
I don't have an email at 8:01 this morning.
Okay, no, actually, it was sent to mbta3a at wakefield.ma.us.
Okay.
Is that, I don't know what that email is, and it was sent to the chairman and myself, so I can forward that along now. Yes, I'll forward it to you, Sam.
Yeah, I didn't check that one this morning.
Yeah, no problem. So I'll just send that to you, and then also to
Okay.
you, Steve, so you both, and am I okay to forward that to Councilor Vincent as well? I'm literally just forwarding an email, I think.
You can forward it. I would just note, and
Informational.
It's for informational
they-
purposes only. I mean, I'll just BCC obviously, and I'm not looking to have a discussion certainly, but it's just informational purposes, so I'll make that clear.
and you can also BCC.
Yeah, I'm going to, yeah.
You can send
Yeah.
it to me and then BCC everybody else, and then nobody else sees.
Right, exactly. And it looks like Councilor McLean already got it from, again, this is a resident that sent to us, and obviously we've not responded to it or done anything with it. But I'll just send it along. So, and yeah, everyone is BCC'd, so it's for informational purposes only strictly. But I do think that she raises an interesting question that it's at least worth exploring, Sam, to understand whether that plays in at all, and I don't know the answer to it.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'll look into that.
I would hope that there's an easy way out of this, but I'm just expecting there isn't. But it is a good question. So if you could help us with that, Sam. And I'll also ask you, Mr. McCauley, too, to sometimes I get a lot of emails, and sometimes I get an email and I'm not sure whether it's been responded to by Sam. I love being CC'd on anything, I really do, but to the extent you can focus in the first instance on working with Samantha.
Sure.
Really appreciate that.
And Sam, I got the email off the town's website. I'm almost certain, but it only had one T. It didn't have two. So I'll go back and forward that to you, and I'll double check the source I got from, just in case there's any somewhere on the page.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know it gets misspelled a lot. So, and Steve also just sent all three you.
You got it, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so we at least I'll have each other's emails.
Oh, very much.
And to the entire subcommittee, if you get an email, even if I'm CC'd on it, feel free to forward it. There is no, I don't have any issue with getting extra emails. It doesn't offend me or bug me. I have 4 different big projects that and boards that I'm dealing with right now, so I have no problem getting sent something multiple times to review. But yeah, I'm happy to follow up on all of this. I've got notes on everything, and we'll be and I do try to make sure I CC everybody back, or BCC at least, so that they can be aware that I'm responding and not ignoring somebody.
Actually, and that's super helpful. Again, obviously, just BCCing just so I can see that you've responded to the residents, because oftentimes they send it obviously to committee members, and we never communicate, as committee members, like about this to 3 counselors. But I think it's helpful at least know that there's been a response. That's is helpful.
Any other?
Sure. There'll be a quick one at the end, but Marcy McCauley, 32 Walden Road. And I'd just like to go on record saying that I'm never a fan of relinquishing rights. And I'm even less of a fan being forced to relinquish rights. And I look at the Superior Energy Code that was passed, and built into that is for a 3-year period, you cannot change that. We voted ourselves into it for a minimum of 3 years, and that's end of story. But even though the town voted against this, you know, we're coming back with it. They voted against it in April and we're coming back with it in November. I think the work that you've done is incredible. For what, putting together the least impact, I agree with you. You've done that. But when I look at this 40A and I think of it side by side to 40B, which has caused this town so much pain and distress, 40A is even a greater relinquishing of rights than 40B. And we know what's happening on Nahant Street, and that is a fine mess over there. And so all of this concerns me, and I look at the areas and I agree with you, it would be the best place for this to go. But I'm wondering, and this is the question, where are all the construction vehicles going to go when, if you have 3 or 4 projects going on in Greenwood there and on Albion Street, which are heavily used roads while this is all happening? And how's that going to impact the town? Because we know that's a huge issue now. And my question is, maybe I'm unaware of some back spaces that this could happen behind some of these lots, but I see a big traffic concern and perhaps think of, you know, ahead of time, rerouting some traffic lanes in case this does happen, because it's getting ugly. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. You want to wait till the end for your next
Well, my
comment?
question is there something I'm not aware of where all of this construction could happen other than on the street that is proposed to, you know, say you have 3 or 4 major projects going on in Greenwood Street and you got people over there trying to get their kids to school.
Yeah, I think we see this all the time now.
Yeah.
Personally don't expect the impact from 48 under this proposal to be the same as the impact we've seen constantly under 40B for decades.
You
It's
don't
not-
think-
I don't
expect it
think
to be
this is
bad?
going to be as great as the risk from 40B of what you're talking about, building going on. If you go up North Ave, there was one day I almost called the town council, the town administrator, because everybody's tired of me calling him. You know, where the construction vehicles weren't yet into the lot for the building that's going up now, so they're all parking on what to me is our sidewalk, darn it. And you shouldn't do that, you know, so there is gonna be a problem anytime we have construction because our roads are tight and our roads are busy. So I couldn't agree with you more. I have, you know, I'm hoping we don't see 100 units on that street, but, you know, that's currently before the ZBA and we will follow that process. And we've had a lot of construction because of our own doing, because of our own special permit districts. So, you know, I'm not disputing anything you say.
I just want to put it out there as a
Yeah.
thought. Thank you.
Because these spots are very high traffic. And if you're looking at like an Albion Street or Greenwood, there is no wiggle room. So construction is gonna take up part of the street, you know, being fenced off to do the work that they need to do, as well as the road work.
We're not gonna, we've never let people park on the public ways all day. Construction people have had to go off-site. We did it with the Galvin. We had them, we made deal with, well, Mike's Gym let us use there. They had to come over. And those are big projects. So, yeah.
Even like the pizza shop, the fence
Yeah.
takes away part of the sidewalk, you know, so you're gonna run into.
Yeah,
issues
you're gonna run
like
into
that.
some of that, absolutely.
And then the infrastructure, that, you know, on my side of this argument, the infrastructure is eventually in these areas to accommodate some of this, not only is the building gonna be torn up, the roadways gonna be torn up, so. that's a whole side of it.
Gotcha. Any other public participation, Steve?
I think you're good, Mr. Chairman.
In which case, why don't we move to item 6, scheduling second public forum? Do you have a proposed date or
Well,
dates yourself there?
Looking at the calendar, and it's getting tight because we've got to get, you know, we've got to finalize this at some point. We need to go to the planning board, we need to go to bylaw review committee, and ultimately town meeting on November 16th. So I have 2 dates that are fairly close, and I'm trying to work around any Jewish holidays too.
Work around whatever we normally have to work around. I know
2
we have
dates I had.
We have multiple meetings.
I know. We're 9/26 and 10/1. were the two dates that I thought worked. Sam is blanching because now she's thinking we have to do the.
Oh,
public
no.
hearing.
That was a
Don't
burp.
worry.
And hide. Clearly didn't do a very good job. No. So the first may be the next housing production plan meeting, the first or the second. We're talking about it that week, so that might be a little bit tricky. But the 26th for me is wide open.
That's a Thursday night.
Mhm.
That would be a better day for me than October 1st.
What differentiates between this being a public meeting and this being the second public meeting?
Public forum.
Public forums.
Public forum is designed to be more of a huge give and take. Although we've been pretty much give and take here.
Well, it's just been conducted as a public forum the entire time. So is this an official second one to first?
It's the
meeting?
official second public
Public
forum
forum.
like we did at the municipal building for the first public
Right.
forum. We had a pretty large attendance at that one. Some was online and some of you folks were right there in the crowd.
So we'd use the same place, I think.
Yeah. I don't know that we're technically required to have a particular. amount
No,
of-
we're not the
in the Latin plural, but,
planning board is, because it's
Yeah.
any zoning bylaw.
right, so this goes
I
through,
wasn't sure because
Yeah.
just when we were doing it, trying to keep it open. We did get a lot of surveys and I hope,
I told you I appreciate all. of
That's
that.
transparency.
I also think people will come more to a public forum than they will to a public meeting, most people. Because forum, they know that it's gonna be more.
it's just another way to get it out there.
Is that something you already have access to the calendar to know what's available that night?
Well, I'm gonna kick out anybody who's there. I'm just making sure these three are available. I have very little power, that's part of it.
That's awesome.
I don't know where your power is.
I don't know if Bob and Ed that work for them.
Yeah, counselors, does 9:26 work for you for a public
Yeah.
forum?
Yeah, I think the earlier the better. So 9:26 is good. Yes.
I
Work for
agree.
you, Ed? And
It doesn't because I'll be running the Berlin Marathon right around that time. So I don't want to hold up the process because of that. And so I would say go ahead without me and I'll have to watch it afterwards.
You can't run a marathon with your phone?
I could try. And I would also remind everyone that I am running for our veterans and our active service members and their families. So anybody who wants to donate to the marathon, just jump to my Facebook page.
Thank you for the sales pitch.
A little plug.
And wait, guys, what time on the 26th?
What did we do
I
last time?
didn't give a time, probably the, 6, does 6 work?
Yes.
6
And
work for you,
Sam, since we're talking about schedule, when we first started this endeavor, you had a task timeline sheet that you gave us that was very useful, but now it's a little bit out of date. Can we get an proposed updated version of this so we can look at it? When we think we're going to do the draft bylaw to the bylaw review committee, when are we going to do the town council presentation? The planning board's got to have their hearings. So we're down to 2 months now before town
Yeah.
meeting. So a lot of these dates have already passed that were on the preliminary one. So we kind of need to get an updated version.
I can work on getting that done as well.
All right, thanks.
Oops.
And Samantha, 6 o'clock is okay for you that day, the 26th?
Yep. Yeah, like
Okay.
I said, my day is aside from a conference, the little thing I have at 2 to 3, I have whole day open for y'all.
Can you do in person that day?
Me? Yes.
Excellent. All right. Thank you for your run there, Counselor Dombrowski. We'll endeavor to persevere without you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? I am.
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Thank you all. Thanks to the public for your participation.
Have a good night, everyone.
Take care.
I will say this meeting is closed at 7:40.